The morning sun slid through the curtains like a blade, sharp and cold. Margaret sat quietly in the back seat of her daughter's car, her wrinkled hands folded on her lap. Outside, the streets she once walked every day blurred past, her favorite bakery, the old library, the corner park where her late husband used to feed the pigeons. Her daughter, Claire, kept her eyes fixed on the road, talking softly about how this was for her safety. But her voice cracked at the edges, betraying something colder underneath. Margaret didn't reply. She only stared at the passing world, knowing each turn of the car was taking her farther from her life. When the car finally stopped, she looked up and realized this wasn't home. The automatic doors of the nursing home hissed open, releasing a faint smell of disinfectant and old air. A nurse smiled too brightly, speaking in a rehearsed tone. "Welcome, Mrs. Hargrove. We'll take good care of you." Margaret's suitcase was small, just enough for a week, though she knew she wouldn't be leaving soon. Her son Daniel placed the papers on the counter quickly, avoiding her gaze. "It's just until you're stronger, Mom," he said, his voice hollow. The nurse wheeled her toward a long hallway lined with quiet rooms. Behind her, she heard the doors slide shut again with a final thud. That sound echoed inside her chest, the sound of being forgotten in her new room. The walls were beige, the curtains thin, and the bed too neatly made. Margaret sat down slowly, her bones aching not from age, but from disbelief. A photo of her family, smiling at last Christmas, rested on the bedside table, left there by Claire as if to soften the guilt. "We'll visit soon," Claire said, forcing a smile before walking away. But Margaret saw the relief in her daughter's eyes, the kind that comes when a burden is finally dropped. When the footsteps faded down the hall, she looked at the window, watching their car disappear from view. Her face stayed calm, but her eyes shimmered, not with tears, but with quiet, dangerous thought. The hallways stretched endlessly, painted in dull yellow that once might have felt warm, but now only resembled fading light. Wheelchairs lined the corridor like forgotten statues, their owners staring blankly at the television flickering in the common room. Margaret's footsteps echoed softly as the nurse guided her past rooms that smelled of bleach and lost memories. Somewhere down the hall, a man coughed, a long, wet sound that refused to end, followed by the faint hum of an old radio playing a war song. "You'll get used to it," the nurse said kindly, though her eyes were already elsewhere. Margaret gave a faint nod, her gaze tracing every door number she passed, memorizing the path back to freedom. At the end of the corridor, she felt something, not fear, but the cold weight of being erased. Her room was shared with two other women. One slept constantly, her breath whistling through an oxygen tube. The other, a frail woman with cloudy eyes, sat by the window whispering names into the air. Margaret unpacked slowly, folding her clothes with precision, her fingers trembling slightly. On the knitstand, she placed her notebook, the one no one else knew about. Inside it were letters, receipts, and notes she'd written for years, a quiet map of her family's greed. That night, the fluorescent light buzzed like an insect above her head. As she lay on the bed, she whispered to herself, "They think I'll fade here." But somewhere deep inside, she began to wonder, how long before they realize I won't? Darkness settled like dust across the room. The night nurse moved through the hallway, her shoes squeaking softly against the tile. Margaret couldn't sleep. Every creak of the building sounded like the house she'd lost calling to her. The woman by the window began humming a lullaby, off-key, haunting. Margaret turned toward her notebook, sliding it beneath her pillow before closing her eyes. Her mind replayed the last words her daughter had said. "It's for your own good." She bit her lip, her chest rising with quiet anger. In the silence, a thought formed, calm, clear, and sharp. If they could put me here, I can find a way to bring them here too. The morning light fell through the tall windows of Margaret's old house, the same house she and her late husband built brick by brick 50 years ago. But the warmth it once held was gone. Now laughter echoed in the kitchen where silence used to mean peace. Claire stood near the stove, humming as she poured coffee into a mug that used to be her mother's favorite, the one with faded blue flowers on it. The sound of Daniel's voice drifted from the living room as he spoke with a real estate agent over the phone. "We'll finish the renovation in 3 weeks," he said proudly. "Then the value will double." The walls, however, seemed to disagree. They creaked faintly like an old throat trying to speak, as if the house itself resented the new owners. And if anyone listened closely, the wind through the cracks almost sounded like a whisper. "You don't belong here." That evening, the siblings gathered around the dining table covered with papers, receipts, and glasses of wine. "We'll rent out the upper floor," Daniel said, his tone brisk, businesslike. "Mom doesn't need all this space anymore. She's got that place now." Claire nodded, pretending to agree, though her eyes flickered toward the family portraits still hanging on the wall, pictures she hadn't dared to take down yet. One photo in particular caught her gaze. Her mother, younger, standing proudly in front of this very house, holding baby Daniel in her arms. The smile in that picture wasn't the smile of weakness. It was strength, silent and certain. For the first time, Claire felt something crawl up her spine. Not guilt exactly, but unease. She turned the photo face down, whispering, "It's for the best." But the sound of shattering glass from the kitchen made her flinch. The mug had fallen, the same one she'd been using earlier. No one had touched it. Days later, Daniel found an envelope in the hallway drawer, a small, dust-covered thing marked with her mother's handwriting, "To be opened only if I'm gone." His curiosity burned through any hesitation. Inside, there was a single key, a bank receipt, and a note that read, "Everything you took is borrowed. You'll return it soon." He frowned, showing it to Claire, who immediately told him to throw it away. But that night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He kept hearing faint creaks from the attic above, a space their mother had always kept locked. By midnight, he climbed the narrow stairs, the wooden steps moaning under his weight. He found the attic door half open, and cold air poured out, carrying the faint smell of lavender and old paper. When he switched on the light, his heart froze. The attic was filled with boxes labeled evidence, records, letters, and right in the center, on a dust-covered table, was an open notebook, her handwriting staring back at him. He didn't know it yet, but the revenge had already begun. It was a gray morning when the rain refused to stop. The nursing home windows were fogged, and the smell of damp carpet filled the hallways. Residents moved slowly like ghosts in slippers, some staring at nothing, others dozing in wheelchairs. At exactly 9, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed down the front hall, slow, deliberate, unfamiliar. The receptionist looked up as the main door opened, letting in a gust of cold wind and a man in a dark coat. He was tall, quiet, his face hidden behind glasses and a soaked hat. He didn't look like family, no flowers, no sympathy in his eyes. He reached into his coat pocket and placed a sealed brown envelope on the counter. "This is from Mrs. Margaret Hargrove," he said in a voice that sounded too calm to be casual. "Make sure she gets it personally." When he turned and walked back into the rain, the receptionist felt an odd chill, like he hadn't come from somewhere, but was going towards something. Later that afternoon, Margaret sat by the window, knitting with slow precision, when the nurse entered holding the envelope. "You've got mail, Mrs. Hargrove," she said, trying to sound cheerful. Margaret's eyes flickered for the first time that day, a small, knowing spark. She took the envelope carefully, her fingers tracing the edges as if she already knew what was inside. The nurse lingered a moment, curious, but Margaret's expression turned firm, dismissing her gently. When she was finally alone, she tore it open. Inside was a single folded page and a photograph. The page read, "Stage 1 complete. They've found the attic. Keep calm." The photograph was of Daniel, standing in the attic, staring at her open notebook, caught by a camera she had hidden years ago. Margaret's lips curved into a faint smile, soft and dangerous. Outside, thunder rolled far away, as if applauding a game just beginning. That night, the hallways were silent, except for the creak of an old ceiling fan and the distant moan of someone talking in their sleep. Margaret placed the letter back into the envelope and slipped it under her mattress. She looked at the small key hanging from her necklace, the one she hadn't removed in years. "Almost time," she whispered, so faintly even the air barely carried the sound. Then she reached for her notebook and flipped to a page titled Phase 2, The Visitor. Her handwriting below read, "He will deliver the documents when they are desperate enough to seek forgiveness." Margaret leaned back on her pillow, eyes open in the dark. The rain outside hit the window rhythmically, like a countdown. And somewhere out there, in her house, Daniel was still awake, staring at that notebook he shouldn't have touched. Neither of them knew it yet, but their paths had already been set to collide again. The morning light fell through the tall windows of Margaret's old house, the same house she and her late husband built brick by brick 50 years ago. But the warmth it once held was gone. Now laughter echoed in the kitchen where silence used to mean peace. Claire stood near the stove, humming as she poured coffee into a mug that used to be her mother's favorite, the one with faded blue flowers on it. The sound of Daniel's voice drifted from the living room as he spoke with a real estate agent over the phone. "We'll finish the renovation in 3 weeks," he said proudly. "Then the value will double." The walls, however, seemed to disagree. They creaked faintly, like an old throat trying to speak, as if the house itself resented the new owners. And if anyone listened closely, the wind through the cracks almost sounded like a whisper. "You don't belong here." That evening, the siblings gathered around the dining table covered with papers, receipts, and glasses of wine. "We'll rent out the upper floor," Daniel said, his tone brisk, businesslike. "Mom doesn't need all this space anymore. She's got that place now." Claire nodded, pretending to agree, though her eyes flickered toward the family portraits still hanging on the wall, pictures she hadn't dared to take down yet. One photo in particular caught her gaze, her mother, younger, standing proudly in front of this very house, holding baby Daniel in her arms. The smile in that picture wasn't the smile of weakness. It was strength, silent and certain. For the first time, Claire felt something crawl up her spine. Not guilt exactly, but unease. She turned the photo face down, whispering, "It's for the best." But the sound of shattering glass from the kitchen made her flinch. The mug had fallen, the same one she'd been using earlier. No one had touched it. Days later, Daniel found an envelope in the hallway drawer, a small, dust-covered thing marked with her mother's handwriting, "To be opened only if I'm gone." His curiosity burned through any hesitation. Inside, there was a single key, a bank receipt, and a note that read, "Everything you took is borrowed. You'll return it soon." He frowned, showing it to Claire, who immediately told him to throw it away. But that night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He kept hearing faint creaks from the attic above, a space their mother had always kept locked. By midnight, he climbed the narrow stairs, the wooden steps moaning under his weight. He found the attic door half open, and cold air poured out, carrying the faint smell of lavender and old paper. When he switched on the light, his heart froze. The attic was filled with boxes labeled evidence, records, letters, and right in the center, on a dust-covered table, was an open notebook, her handwriting staring back at him. He didn't know it yet, but the revenge had already begun. Days in the nursing home followed a rhythm. Breakfast at 8, medicine at 9, silence after 10. The same television shows played every afternoon, and the same soup smell filled the dining hall. Margaret had learned to blend in, to let people think she was just another frail woman counting her days. But beneath her calm eyes, she watched everything. Who came late, who whispered too softly, which nurse signed which papers. One morning, a new nurse entered her room, younger than the others, with tired eyes that held kindness. Her name tag read Nora. She spoke gently, checking Margaret's blood pressure, asking about her comfort. But what caught Margaret's attention wasn't her voice. It was how she listened. She didn't rush. She didn't fake concern. She waited. And for the first time since she arrived, Margaret said something she hadn't said to anyone there. Not everyone here deserves to be forgotten. Nora paused, meeting her eyes, and in that moment, something passed between them. A silent understanding neither could explain. Over the next few weeks, their bond deepened quietly. Nora began staying after her shifts, helping Margaret with small things, reading letters, adjusting the window blinds, making her tea that didn't taste like medicine. They talked softly at night when the halls were empty. Sometimes about Nora's dreams, sometimes about Margaret's memories. One night, as the rain whispered against the windows, Margaret reached beneath her pillow and pulled out a small silver key tied with red thread. She placed it in Nora's hand. "When the time comes," she said in a voice both calm and grave, "you'll know where this fits." Nora looked at her confused. "What is it for?" Margaret smiled faintly. "It opens something that's been waiting longer than both of us." The nurse hesitated, staring at the key glinting in the dim light, her instincts caught between fear and curiosity. Outside, thunder rolled softly, like a warning that this trust would come with a price. That same night, Nora returned to her small on-site room, still holding the key. Sleep didn't come easily. The image of Margaret's calm, unreadable face wouldn't leave her mind. She finally slipped the key into her pocket and whispered to herself, maybe she just misses home. But deep down, she knew this wasn't about missing anything. It was about something coming. The next morning, as she walked past the reception desk, she overheard two nurses whispering about that man who'd come with the envelope weeks ago. "No name, no ID," one said. "Creepy if you ask me." Nora froze mid-step. She turned and looked toward the hallway leading to Margaret's room. Something in her chest tightened, the kind of instinct that told her she had just stepped into a story much bigger than she realized. By the time she reached the room, Margaret was already sitting up, eyes open, waiting for her almost as if she'd heard every word. "Did you sleep well, dear?" Margaret asked softly. Nora forced a smile, clutching the key in her pocket. And though she said yes, her heart whispered no, because deep down, she already knew this key would one day unlock more than a door. Daniel sat at the long oak dining table, the one that once hosted Christmas dinners and birthdays, now covered with bills and half-drunk coffee cups. The house didn't feel alive anymore. The laughter that used to echo in the halls was replaced by the groan of the old floorboards and the hum of the refrigerator that never seemed to stop. Claire entered, her hair messy, her voice sharp. "Did the bank call?" Daniel rubbed his temples. "Yeah, they froze one of the accounts. said there's an issue with authorization signatures. Claire frowned. Authorization? Mom signed those years ago. He looked at her quietly, then said something that made the air tighten between them. Maybe not. For a moment, neither spoke. Outside, the wind began to rise, brushing against the windows like fingers dragging across glass. Claire turned to the family portraits still hanging on the wall, the same one she'd tried to take down weeks ago. This time, it had fallen slightly crooked. She didn't fix it. Something about that felt wrong. By afternoon, things began to spiral. Emails went unanswered. Property agents stopped calling. One even sent a short message that chilled them both. We can't proceed. Legal dispute on the deed. Daniel's chest tightened. He stormed into the study, pulling open the drawers that used to be his mother's. Inside were her old files, yellowed and neatly tied with red ribbon. He tore one open and froze. The papers inside weren't property receipts. They were letters. Dozens of them, addressed to lawyers, financial advisors, even a local journalist. All signed with her name. All recent. How could he began, but his voice cracked. Claire took one of the letters, scanning the words, her hands trembling. To whom it may concern, the property at 43 Maple Avenue has been unlawfully transferred. All ownership will revert to the rightful owner upon my passing. Evidence enclosed. Her eyes widened. Daniel! These are dated after she left. He stared at the letter, the ink slightly smudged, as if it had been written just days ago. And then the house phone rang, once, twice. When he answered, there was silence, then the faint sound of an old woman humming a lullaby through the static. He slammed the phone down, pale and sweating. It's not possible, he whispered. But somewhere in that house, something was beginning to move. That night, the siblings sat together in the dim living room, surrounded by shadows. The lights flickered once, twice, before dimming to a weak glow. Claire scrolled through her phone, message after message from banks, lawyers, friends, all avoiding her now. They think we stole from her, she muttered, voice trembling. Daniel said nothing. His eyes were fixed on the window, or rather on the faint reflection in it. For a split second, he thought he saw her, his mother, standing in the garden, looking up at the house. But when he turned around, there was only emptiness and wind. He stood shaking his head. It's just my mind, he said, but his tone wasn't convincing. In the kitchen, the faucet began dripping. 1, 2. 3 slow drops echoing into the silence. Then the lights flickered again, this time staying dark. From somewhere deep in the house, a faint sound rose, the click of a tape recorder starting to play. A woman's voice filled the darkness, calm, familiar, chilling. If you're hearing this, then you finally open what was never yours. Claire screamed. The recording crackled again. You shouldn't have touched my attic. And then silence. Only the storm outside and 2 children who finally realized they weren't in control anymore. The sun rose pale and colorless that morning, casting a sickly glow over the once proud house. Daniel sat at the breakfast table, unable to eat. Every sound, the kettle hissing, the clock ticking, felt too loud, too accusing. His phone buzzed again and again, notifications lighting up the screen like fireflies. He finally checked one, then froze. The message was from a friend he hadn't spoken to in years. Is it true? Saw your name on the news. Daniel's blood ran cold. He opened the news link and there it was. A headline stretched across the local website. Elderly woman left in care home under suspicious circumstances, family accused of financial exploitation. Below it was a picture of Margaret, smiling faintly in her nursing home bed, The very photo Claire had posted months ago, now used as evidence. The caption read, "Sources claim the elderly woman left documents exposing her family's betrayal before her sudden death." Daniel's fork slipped from his hand and clattered on the table. Claire walked in, still half asleep, until she saw his face. Then hers went white too. "Daniel, what did you do?" she whispered. He looked up slowly. "No, Claire, what did we do?" And from somewhere far away, a church bell tolled, deep, echoing, like a countdown dot. By afternoon, their phones wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters at the gate. Neighbors whispering from across the street. The mail slot clattered every hour with anonymous letters, some filled with insults, others with sympathy written in shaky handwriting. Claire locked herself in her room, scrolling endlessly through the comments online. Monsters, poor woman, they'll get what's coming. The words burned into her eyes. She turned toward the window and saw a small group gathered outside, strangers holding candles, murmuring prayers. At the center of their small vigil stood an old woman with a walking cane, holding a framed photo of Margaret. She looked up, meeting Claire's eyes through the window. Her lips moved slowly, soundlessly, but Claire could read the words. "She remembers." Claire stumbled back, her breath shallow. She called for Daniel, but he didn't answer. His car was gone. Downstairs, the television had turned on by itself. The same news report now played on the big screen, but with one new update scrolling along the bottom. Breaking. Nursing home surveillance footage found. Claire sank to the floor, trembling. "What footage?" She whispered. The footage aired that night. Every TV channel, every online feed. The scene showed Margaret sitting at her nursing home desk, writing in her notebook under dim yellow light. Her voice was soft but steady, captured clearly by the camera in the corner. "If anything happens to me, let the truth be known. My children thought they could bury me in silence. But silence listens. Silence remembers." Her eyes lifted, right into the camera, and for a second, it felt like she was staring at everyone who had betrayed her. "They took everything I had, but they forgot one thing." She paused, a faint smile crossing her face. "I was never alone here." Behind her, in the reflection of the window, shapes seemed to move, faint. Shadowy figures of other residents watching quietly, their eyes hollow yet knowing. The video cut to black. Across the city, people gasped. Some wept, some whispered prayers. And inside the house, Claire sat frozen, the TV light flickering over her pale face. From behind her, the front door creaked open. Slow, deliberate footsteps entered. A familiar humming, that same lullaby. She turned, heart pounding. "Mom!" Rain slashed across the windshield as Daniel's car tore down the empty road leading to Maple Avenue. The headlights struggled against the darkness, catching only fragments, wet asphalt, glistening leaves, the occasional street sign blurred by water. His face was pale, his eyes sunken from sleepless nights. The news had destroyed everything. His job, his reputation, his peace. But more than that, their house, had started calling him back. He hadn't planned to return tonight, but something inside him insisted. A gnawing whisper that repeated over and over, "Go back. Finish it." When he turned onto Maple Avenue, the old oak trees leaned over the road like watchers in mourning. The house stood at the end, dark and waiting, its windows glowing faintly with the reflection of passing lightning. He parked the car and sat still, the engine ticking softly as it cooled. The porch light flickered, once, twice, then went out completely. Still, he stepped out. The moment his feet hit the soaked ground, the rain stopped, and the silence that followed felt almost alive, Inside, the house was colder than he remembered. The air carried a heavy scent, damp wood, faint perfume, and something else. Something metallic. The hallway lights buzzed weakly, casting long shadows that bent across the floorboards. As he walked deeper, he noticed the faint sound of humming. It was coming from upstairs. That song again, the lullaby his mother used to hum when he was a child, when everything still felt safe. He climbed the staircase, each step groaning beneath his weight. At the top, he saw it. The attic door slightly open, just enough to show a sliver of darkness beyond. A cold draft swept through the hallway, carrying with it the faint scent of lavender, her scent. His hand shook as he reached for the doorknob. It was colder than ice. He pushed the door open. Inside, the attic looked untouched, boxes stacked neatly, old furniture draped in sheets, dust swirling like slow snow in the flashlight's beam. But in the center of the room sat a small wooden chair, and on it her notebook, the one he thought had been buried with her. He hesitated before stepping forward, reaching out slowly, but then something shifted behind him. A whisper, soft and close. "You came back, didn't you?" He turned, heart slamming in his chest, but the attic was empty. Completely empty. Except for the smell of lavender, now stronger than ever. Hands trembling, Daniel opened the notebook. The pages were filled with neat handwriting, his mother's, but these weren't the same notes she'd written about her children's betrayal. These were new. Fresh ink, glistening as though the pen had just lifted minutes ago. He turned one page, then another. Each page described moments that hadn't happened yet. Claire will wake to knocking at her door. Daniel will find the truth when he reaches the attic. His eyes widened. The next line was written larger, darker. He will read this. Just before he hears me. Daniel froze. The attic went utterly still. And then, from behind the chair, came the faintest sound of movement. Slow, deliberate breathing. He turned slowly, his voice breaking. "Mom." Lightning flashed through the window, illuminating the shape of a woman standing behind the chair, her outline faint and ghostly, her face hidden in shadow. The thunder cracked. When the light returned, she was gone. Only the notebook remained open, a new line appearing in wet ink as he watched. "Welcome home, Daniel." Claire hadn't slept since the footage aired. The house felt foreign. Every tick of the clock, every flicker of the lamp seemed like a warning. She had moved into a small rented flat miles away, thinking she could escape the noise, the reporters, the shame. But guilt has its own voice. That night, as rain whispered against the window, she heard it again, a soft knock at her door. 3 slow, deliberate taps. She froze. Her phone showed 3:03 a.m. She waited, breath shallow. Then came the second set of knocks. She forced herself to the door, whispering, "Who's there?" Silence. She peered through the peephole, nothing but the dim hallway. No footsteps, no shadows. But as she turned away, her eyes caught something on the floor. A small folded note slid under the door. She hesitated before picking it up. The paper was damp, the ink slightly smudged, but the handwriting was unmistakable. Her mother's. "You left me once. I'm just returning the favor." The lights in the apartment flickered. And in the reflection of the window, for just a heartbeat, she saw her mother standing behind her. Eyes calm, smile soft, hands folded like before. Then darkness. Back at Maple Avenue, Daniel hadn't moved from the attic. The rain hammered the roof, thunder roaring like the sky itself wanted to warn him. He stared at the notebook, the words, "Welcome home, Daniel," still wet and glistening. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Claire. He answered immediately. Claire, you need to... Her voice was broken, trembling. She's here, Daniel. She left me a note. He gripped the notebook tighter. I know. She's here too. For a moment, all they could hear was the static between them. Then a faint sound, a humming. That lullaby. It was coming through both their phones at once. Daniel's blood froze. Hang up, he whispered. But before she could, the humming stopped, replaced by a soft, raspy voice on both ends of the call. Did you miss me, children? Claire screamed. The line went dead. Daniel dropped the phone. The attic door slammed shut behind him. Claire ran to the bathroom, heart racing, tears streaming down her face. She turned on the tap, splashing cold water over herself, trying to breathe. It's not real, she whispered over and over. It's not real. But when she looked up into the mirror, her reflection didn't move. It stared back, older, paler, with faint bruises around the neck. Her mother's reflection. The reflection smiled. Do you know what regret looks like, Claire? Claire stumbled backward, crashing into the counter. The light above her flickered, casting stuttering shadows that danced across the walls. When she dared to look again, the mirror was cracked, the reflection gone. In its place were 3 words scrawled across the glass in foggy handwriting. See you soon. Across town, at that same moment, Daniel heard a whisper near his ear, though no one stood there. She's almost home. And for the first time since she'd died, both siblings realized something terrible. Their mother's revenge wasn't just about guilt or fear. It was about returning. Morning light crept weakly through Daniel's attic window. He hadn't slept. The notebook still sat before him. Its pages turned to blank ones, yet faint handwriting was appearing slowly, as if being written by invisible hands. He rubbed his eyes, whispering, "Stop this. Please stop this." Then, from inside one of the old boxes, he noticed a glimmer, a sealed brown envelope, yellowed and brittle, marked in Margaret's elegant script, to be opened only when you finally understand. His hand shook as he tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper, her will. But this wasn't the legal document they'd forged years ago. This was her real one. The words were chillingly simple. Everything I own returns to the home that raised me. And to those who wronged me, you will inherit my silence until it begins to speak. Beneath the signature was something else, a faint outline of a handprint pressed into the paper in dried crimson. Daniel dropped the will. The house groaned, long, low, and alive, as if something beneath the floorboards had just woken up. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees. Inheritance. Accepted. Claire hadn't left her flat since the night of the mirror. Her eyes were bloodshot, her hands trembling as she packed a small bag. She wanted to leave the city, the country, everything. But as she opened her wardrobe, something fell from the top shelf, a wooden jewelry box she hadn't seen in years. It was her mother's, the one she'd taken the day they moved her to the nursing home. She stared at it for a long moment before opening it. Inside were trinkets, a pearl brooch, a small rosary, an old photograph of the family, and a folded piece of paper. She unfolded it slowly. The handwriting was the same. Claire, some things cannot be hidden under gold. What you stole wasn't money. It was my dignity. And dignity always finds its way home. Beneath the note, the rosary beads began to move, slowly at first, then rattling violently against the box, spinning as if pulled by invisible hands. Claire screamed, dropping it. The beads scattered across the floor, forming a perfect circle around her feet. In the silence that followed, She heard her mother's voice behind her, gentle, almost loving. "I forgive you, my dear." Claire turned, tears spilling down her face, but the room was empty. Only the faint scent of lavender lingered, drifting toward the open door. Back at Maple Avenue, Daniel wandered through the house, the will clutched in his hand. The walls seemed to pulse faintly, as if they were breathing. The wallpaper, once bright, now looked darker, older. He could hear whispers moving through the vents, calling his name in 100 different tones. At the foot of the stairs, the family portrait had fallen again. The glass cracked cleanly across Margaret's face. He picked it up and saw something new, faint words written in the dust across the frame. Downstairs. Heart pounding, he descended into the basement. The air grew heavier with each step. When he reached the bottom, the old bulb flickered to life by itself, revealing something he'd never seen before. Symbols drawn in chalk on the floor, faded but still visible. In the center sat another box, small, wooden, carved with her initials. He knelt and opened it. Inside was a cassette tape. On it, written in fading ink, "Play me when you're ready to hear the truth." He looked around, chest tight, the shadows thickening. A low hum filled the air, her lullaby again, this time coming from everywhere at once. And as he placed the cassette into the old player nearby, the tape clicked, hissed, and her voice began. "Hello, Daniel. I've been waiting for you to listen." The moment Claire and Daniel stepped over the threshold, the air changed. It wasn't just cold, it was thick, almost heavy, like the house itself had lungs and was breathing around them. Every creak of the floorboards sounded deliberate. Every flicker of the lights seemed to follow their steps. Daniel switched on his flashlight, the beam slicing through the dusty darkness. "We'd go up, sign whatever she left, and leave," he muttered. His voice echoed too long, too deep. Claire said nothing. She couldn't, her throat felt tight, her body tense. She glanced at the portraits lining the hallway. Each frame was covered in dust, except one, their mother's. Someone had cleaned it recently. Her painted eyes gleamed faintly in the light. Claire whispered, "Do you smell that?" Daniel paused. Lavender, strong, fresh, as if someone had just walked through with a bottle of perfume. Then footsteps. Slow, dragging from upstairs. The siblings exchanged a look. "She's waiting," Claire said. And as they began climbing the stairs, the clock on the wall struck 12. Each chime echoed through the house like a heartbeat. By the final toll, the attic door was open, waiting for them. The attic was exactly as Daniel had left it. The single chair, the open notebook, the faint smell of rain-soaked wood. But now was something new. A wooden table stood in the center, draped with a white cloth. On it lay 2 sheets of parchment, 2 old fountain pens, and a single candle burning low. The flame barely flickered, though there was no breeze. Claire stepped closer. "What is this?" she whispered. Daniel leaned in. The documents looked like property transfer papers, their names already written at the top in perfect, flowing handwriting. But there was no signature line for their mother. Only one for each of them. At the bottom of the page, beneath faint stains that looked like dried blood, was a single phrase: "By signing, you accept the house and all that it holds." Claire's hands shook. No, Daniel. This isn't right. This is... A sound stopped her. The candle flame stretched tall, flickering wildly, and from the shadows behind the table came a voice, calm, distant, unmistakable. "You wanted everything that was mine, didn't you?" The siblings froze. Their mother's voice, but it wasn't coming from the air. It was coming from the notebook. The pages fluttered on their own and faint writing began appearing, one word at a time, as though an invisible hand were moving across the paper. Sign, my darlings. Make it official. Daniel took a step back. This is insane. Claire's eyes filled with tears. Daniel, she's dead. The voice came again, softer now, almost kind. Then let me rest. The candle went out. Darkness swallowed the attic. Only moonlight seeped through the cracked window, spilling across the table. The air vibrated faintly, like the world was holding its breath. Daniel fumbled for his phone's flashlight. The moment he turned it on, the papers were different. The words had changed. One must stay. He blinked, reading it again. The ink shimmered faintly like something alive. Claire, it says, I see it. Her voice was hollow. She never wanted both of us to leave. Then they heard it, the creak of the floorboards behind them, slow and rhythmic. Margaret's figure emerged from the shadows, faint, translucent, yet every detail painfully real. The same soft cardigan, the same calm face, the same cold eyes. She looked between them, smiling faintly. I built this house for love. You turned it into a cage. Daniel fell to his knees. Mom, please. No, Daniel. You begged for what wasn't yours. You buried me before I was gone. Her voice deepened, layered with something darker, voices of the other forgotten souls from the nursing home echoing through hers. Now one of you will remember me. Forever. Claire sobbed, backing toward the door, but it slammed shut. The candle reignited by itself, the flame turning blue. The papers on the table lifted slightly, like held by invisible hands. Sign. Daniel grabbed the pen with shaking hands. If it ends this, I'll do it. The moment the ink touched paper, the house groaned, a low, guttural sound that shook the floor. The candle flared, burning bright white, and a wind rushed through the attic, scattering dust and whispers. Then, silence. When Claire opened her eyes, Daniel was gone. The paper he'd signed lay empty except for 2 words, written in fresh, dark ink. He stayed. Claire screamed, pounding the attic door until it burst open. She stumbled down the stairs, gasping for air, the echoes of her mother's lullaby following her all the way to the front door. Outside, the night was still. The house behind her was dark again, perfectly quiet. But when she looked back, she saw Daniel standing at the window, smiling, and behind him, their mother's shadow. Claire didn't remember how she got into her car. Rain pounded on the windshield, headlights cutting through thick fog as she sped down the empty road. Her hands trembled on the wheel. Her breath came in shallow bursts. Every shadow outside looked like it was moving. Every shape on the roadside looked like a figure turning to watch her pass. She glanced at the rearview mirror and froze. For a split second, she saw Daniel sitting in the back seat, his face calm, eyes open, smiling faintly. She slammed the brakes, heart pounding. The car screeched to a stop. She turned, the seat was empty. But his voice whispered in her ear, clear as day, "You shouldn't have left me." She stumbled out of the car, into the rain, gasping for breath. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A new message from Daniel. Come home. She dropped the phone onto the wet asphalt and ran. But in the distance, through the veil of rain, she could still see it, the outline of the house, faint, waiting, glowing softly under the storm. No matter how far she drove, it was still there. Days passed, or maybe weeks. Claire wasn't sure anymore. She checked into a small motel on the outskirts of town, avoiding her reflection, avoiding people, avoiding sleep. But sleep had a way of finding her. Each night, the dreams returned. The house at the end of the street, The ticking clock. Daniel's voice calling her name from the attic. Sometimes she'd wake up and find footprints, muddy, bare, leading from the door to her bed. On the 7th night, the motel clerk knocked on her door. "Miss, you've got mail." She frowned. "Mail here?" He nodded and handed her a small brown envelope. The return address read, 43 Maple Avenue. Her stomach turned cold. She tore it open. Inside was a single key. Attached to it, a note. "You forgot your half." That night, she packed her things and drove again, telling herself she'd destroy the house once and for all. But as she neared Maple Avenue, the air grew thicker, the lights dimmer, and the sky darker than before. When she stopped the car, the front door was already open. The house had been waiting inside. Everything was exactly as she'd left it, except it wasn't. The air was too still, the silence too deep. The furniture had shifted slightly, like it had moved while she was gone. On the dining table lay 2 teacups, one steaming. Her throat went dry. "Daniel?" No answer. Then from the walls, faintly, a whisper. "It's your turn now." The lights flickered. A photo frame fell to the floor, glass shattering across her feet. She bent down and froze. The picture inside had changed. It wasn't her family anymore. It was her, sitting at the table, pale, eyes hollow, holding the same teacup that sat before her now. The floorboards creaked above. The attic door opened on its own. "Not again," she whispered, stepping back toward the exit. But the front door slammed shut, locking itself. The temperature dropped instantly. Her breath came out in white clouds. And then the humming began. That same lullaby, slow, sweet, endless. The walls seemed to pulse with it, like the house itself was alive. From the top of the stairs, Daniel's voice called softly, "She's been waiting for you." Claire looked up and saw them. Her mother and brother standing side by side in the flickering light. Margaret smiled gently, holding out a hand. "Come home, sweetheart." And Claire, trembling, broken, terrified, took a step forward. A week after Claire vanished, the townsfolk whispered about the old place again. Neighbors said they saw the lights turn on at night, even though no one lived there. Some claimed to hear music, a lullaby drifting through the fog, while others swore they saw a woman's shadow standing by the upstairs window. When Officer Reeves received the missing person report, he didn't believe a word of it. He'd been a cop too long to fear ghost stories. The house on Maple Avenue was just another property caught in rumor and rot. Still, procedure was procedure. He parked outside the rust-colored gate as dusk settled, his flashlight beam cutting through the damp mist. The house loomed in silence, its windows like blank eyes. Something about the air felt wrong. Too still, too aware. He called out, "Police!" "Anyone inside?" No answer. But the door creaked open on its own, slow, deliberate. Reeves exhaled sharply, whispering, "Okay, old house. Show me what you got." He stepped inside and the door shut quietly behind him. Inside, time had stopped. Dust hung suspended like smoke. The scent of stale perfume lingered, lavender and something metallic beneath it. Reeves's flashlight flickered as he scanned the foyer. Every surface was coated in years of neglect, but the fireplace was still warm. He checked the mantel. Family photos, yellowed letters, one newspaper clipping in a cracked frame. Local businessman found dead in family home. The photos showed Daniel's face, blurred by the camera flash. Beneath it, in faint pencil, someone had written, "Not dead." "Waiting." Reeves frowned, flipping open his notebook. The case had been closed. Officially, Daniel and Claire were presumed missing, their mother deceased long ago. But then, a noise. A door upstairs, slow and deliberate. "Police!" He called again, moving toward the staircase. "If someone's here, come down." The creaking stopped. The air grew colder. He climbed the stairs one step at a time, his boots echoing through the hollow house. At the top, he noticed something carved into the banister, initials burned into the wood. MHD-C Margaret. Henry. Claire. He traced the letters with his gloved hand, and the wood felt warm, like skin. The upper hallway stretched longer than it should have, each door identical, each corner darker than the last. The smell of candle wax drifted through the air. He followed it to the end of the hall, where an attic ladder hung slightly open. A soft hum seeped from above, that same lullaby. Slow, rhythmic, human. Reeves climbed the steps, flashlight trembling slightly. At the top, the beam cut across the attic and froze. 4 chairs, 4 teacups, 4 figures sitting perfectly still around a small wooden table. Margaret, Daniel, Claire, and a 4th chair, empty, facing him. His throat tightened. What in God's name? The attic bulb flickered. Margaret's head turned slowly toward him, eyes open, lips curling into the faintest smile. "We've been expecting you." The flashlight slipped from his hand, clattering to the floor. He stumbled backward toward the ladder, but the opening was gone. The ceiling was solid wood. "No exit." The voices began, layered, echoing, whispering from the walls. "Every house needs a keeper. Stay a while. You came looking. Now you're part of it." Reeves screamed, pounding on the walls, but the sound was swallowed whole. The lullaby grew louder until it was all that existed. Outside, the lights of the house flickered once, twice, then went out completely, and Maple Avenue fell silent again. Months later, the street looked different. The autumn wind carried dry leaves down Maple Avenue, whispering secrets through the trees. The old house stood at the very end, its paint peeling, its shutters hanging loose, yet somehow it seemed awake. A sleek black car pulled up, tires crunching over gravel. A woman in a tailored gray coat stepped out, clipboard in hand. Rachel Evans, real estate consultant. She'd been sent to inspect the property before putting it back on the market. The company wanted a quick sale, but the file she'd been given was merely blank. No current owner listed, no transfer record, no living relatives. "Probably a bureaucratic mess," she muttered, adjusting her scarf as she walked toward the porch. The for sale sign leaned crooked in the yard, its edges burnt slightly as if touched by flame. She brushed it off and straightened it. The moment her hand touched the wood, a chill shot up her arm. She pulled back quickly, frowning. "Old house, old energy," she said to herself, but the words didn't feel right. From the window above, the curtain shifted slightly. Something, or someone, was watching. Inside, dust and silence greeted her like old friends. She clicked her penlight on, scanning the room, ornate furniture under white sheets, cracked wallpaper, a faint perfume in the air. Her footsteps echoed across the wooden floorboards as she dictated notes into her phone. Structure seems stable. Minor rot on east wall. Strange temperature fluctuations. She paused. Her breath was visible. The air was freezing, though the thermostat read 70. Her eyes caught something on the table near the fireplace, 4 teacups, perfectly arranged. The porcelain gleamed clean, as if freshly washed. Next to them, a new cup sat at the edge, empty. "A 5th one." She hesitated, then reached out to touch it and stopped. A voice, faint and calm, spoke from somewhere deeper in the house. "We saved you a seat." Rachel froze, her pulse racing. "Who's there?" She called out, No response, just the ticking of an unseen clock. She turned in a slow circle, but the front door she'd entered through was now closed, locked. The key she'd used was gone from her coat pocket. The wind outside stopped completely. And somewhere upstairs, a lullaby began to play. By morning, Maple Avenue was quiet again. The sleek black car still sat by the curb, its headlights dimmed by the mist. A mailman passing by noticed something odd, a new for sale sign freshly staked in the yard, gleaming white, the paint still wet. He frowned, adjusting his cap, curious. The name on it wasn't a real estate agency anymore. It read, The Holloway Family Estate. Underneath, in red ink, caretaker, R. Evans. He squinted. Caretaker? Never heard of that firm. As he turned to leave, the curtain in the upstairs window fluttered open. A woman's face appeared, pale, serene, smiling faintly. Her gray coat collar was turned up, her hair softly tangled. Rachel Evans. She lifted her hand and waved slowly at the mailman. He waved back, uncertain why the sight made his stomach twist. And just before he turned the corner, he heard it, faint but unmistakable, a soft melody drifting from the house. The same lullaby that had never really stopped.